It would be senseless to accept anyone's theories of Atlantean civilization. Europe, Asia, and Africa also vanished when Atlantis was destroyed. I can accept the possibility that the great many of settlements of the Atlanteans of Europe, Asia, and Africa, or even most of their settlements, were destroyed by the flood that destroyed Atlantis, but certainly not all of them. Some of the Atlantean colonies of Europe, Asia, and Africa survived on, and we all have to accept that no matter how much one cannot believe a theory, for it is most certainly true, for it is the Atlantean civilization of the Mediterranean region entirely vanished. The Roman and Greek civilization would never have came into existence. No doubt that the Atlantean survivors of Europe, Asia, and Africa continued on with their civilized way of life. And of course, the civilization that followed much later are indeed the descendants of the Atlantean civilization of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Atlantis, destroyed by the flood, was eventually forgotten by the Atlantean people of Europe, Asia, and Africa. This is minus one people, of course, for the descendants of the Atlanteans who made Italy their home. They must have time forgot the place of origin, and sadly, there no longer existed in Italy as a free and independent people, even though I do believe many of the descendants of the Atlanteans of Italy do recognize, even to today, that they are very different compared to the rest of the population of Italy. Unfortunately, the Atlanteans of Italy never kept themselves organized as a people that I know of, like the Basque people of Spain and France currently do. And I must include the Gypsy people most def- uh, definitely as well. For some reason that I have no knowledge of, the Basque people of Spain, France, and state uh, France have stayed together as a people, yet they are very mixed in race, obviously. As of now, I have done little research into the history of the Basque people, other than discovering that the Basque people are the original occupants of Western Europe, or at least the Basque people consider themselves to be the original occupants of Western Europe, and their language is not related to the Indo-European language family, which, unlike the Gypsies, tell a major story. The Basque people are probably the descendants of European Carthaginians and Iberians. It may be that the Basque people also consider themselves original occupants of Western Europe, but if I had my choice, I would have to agree with the Basque people because the current struggle the Basque people are experiencing, as well as the Atlantis story. In reality, the Basque people have resisted intruders in their land for a very long time, and it was going to continue on for evidently long time. But for the Basque people admitting to the world that they are Carthaginians, Atlanteans, or Iberians, Atlanteans, that is far different scenario. For the Gypsy people, most definitely as well. For some reason that I had no knowledge of, the Basque people. Yeah, we read that shit. We read that. My fault, y'all. I had to go get the baby together, get my little man situated. He be coming here turned up, fucking up a nigga videos and whatnot. Probably descendants of the European or Carthaginians or Iberians. It may be that the non-Basque people are considered themselves the original occupants of Western Europe. We read that. We read that. But yeah, the reason we have read that. This goes to what we read earlier. The Queen Khalifa, of whom we write is no modern queen, but is she reigned some 550 years ago. Her precise contemporaries were Amid of Gaul and the Emperor Vespasian, the Sultan of Rodario, and she flourished, as the books say, at the time when this Sultan made his unsuccessful attack on the city of Constantinople, all of which is all part of what she was. She was not petite, nor blonde, nor golden hair. She was large and black as the ace of clubs, but the prejudice of color did not exist even among the most brazen faces, or the most copper-headed, for they shall learn she was reputed as the most beautiful of women, and it was she, O Californians, who wedded the gallant Prince Telequay. You know, it's a little off subject. We don't get back into what we was on. The Algonquin conquest of the. We talked about the implements of bronze of Europe were delivered from Atlantis to the Atlanteans, or also the manufacturers of iron. So we'd start, we'd come back over here, and we're gonna say the mines, bronze, let's see, I got my shit going crazy. I can't even search. Let's see. I ain't asking nothing about this. Bronze mine. Scientists find evidence of ancient copper mining in populated lakes and sediments in the Isles of Rosalie Park in Michigan. So the veins of copper that rippled through the bedrock drew attention to early Native Americans who used the metal to make tools. However, many details of their activities, such as when they mined, remain hidden behind a thick haze of time, and it suggests that the Isles of Royale mining boom peaked about 6,000 years ago and left a legacy of uh, aquatic population and high levels of copper, lead, and potassium in sediments from coves on the island. Point too long, intense period of indigenous mining research presents the results published by recent journals, the Hollands. Saw Money In over here. We get all the info on TikTok. Over here, we head back into our post and get back to reading. America demonstrates that the cosmic terror, interwoven with the very rap of the wolf or the sacred literature, the Christians or the pagans referred to the occurrence as literally true as the earthquakes of Lisbon, the stupendous event that began connected primarily with the great destruction and recovery of the equilibrium of the solar system, and secondly, with the consequent wrecking of the continents of America, when the globe became involved in the consequence of the disorder of the skies. America, when this fell, ruins befell at the seat of the greatest empire that had ever existed. The irresistible armies were terrorizing all of Europe and Asia. So we just read in our book, Algonquin conquest of America. They reinforce what we're talking about. In America, rediscovered in the 15th century and the repopulated in the 17th, were recovered Egypt and the Promised Land, or the land of the constellation of the Eagle, Aquila, Egyptus, the Swan, Sinus, Canaan, Canada, whose places will be shown as fixed in America by the same combination of celestial terrestrial geography which gives Russia the bear, to China the lion, and to the British India the unicorn, and the Great Pyramids the Pleiades with the constellation of the gigantic violet stone is directly connected by Herschel, Proctor, Smith, and other foremost astronomers. This what fact renders it strikingly appropriate that the first parliaments of religion in history in the world should have been held on American soil, thus bringing together the brethren long separated upon the identical continents occupied by their common progenitors before the confusion of lips. Although several areas were still untouchable, this does not mean that the anthropological actions were not already taking place. In fact, since the arrival of the Europeans in the region, several forms of land use were slowly changing the landscape. For instance, the exploitation of wood was intense, namely exploitation of pau Brazil. Besides, along the agricultural lands exploited by the region, orders by the Cato Frio inhabitants, there were already established in the region at least three sugar cane mills, uh, Sacramama, the Pitagina, or the Patari. So we're gonna tie all that. We already went through this in our videos, and go back and check out the Haile Selassie video for this rundown. But I'll hold it over there for y'all where we read this. We're gonna dig into some other stuff to make sure we're good. It says in Armenia, whence the fall of the plains of Peru and Bolivia, or the point of exit of the present human race, Nelly Atlantis. The mythic meaning of the priest, Greek priesta, is one who stands at the outer border. Peru was the outer border of the ancient world empire of Atlantis. The Peruvians designated the large collection of tribes and nations who were under the scepter of the Incas by the epithet Tavantinisuyu, i.e., the four quarters of the world. We go dig into that. The Persian mythic baptismal font, regarded as the Egyptian origin of Egypt, as in Peru, the water used to impression absolutely cleanse the soul of the person was said to be regenerated. So they're talking about the fountain of youth. Paganism surviving in Christianity. The Egyptian name of the phoenix was Funk or Fanak, i.e., supreme ruler. Fa stands for the, and Nuk stands for the render of Inca, the son of the sun, the supreme ruler of Peru. Voigmenes or Cheops of Peruvian, Persia, or Hebrew, all worship the deity as a consuming fire, and imitated the divine dealing and casting fire from heaven upon the guilty men by throwing offenders into the flames by the systematic sacrifice of fiery altars. Such points of similarity lent great interest to the fact that the Egyptians named the Hebrews was Aparu or Apuria, or the P replacing the cognitive B, Egypt and Babylon, Ra and Sun. The supposition is almost justified, says Cathenius, Mysteries of the Ages, that the Hebrew and possibly all the Peruvians we behold tribes of the ancient Atlantis, the terror of the catastrophes that destroy their continent may have some impress itself upon the minds hereditarily that the Hebrews' conception of gods were more inclined to fear than love. It may also have been such an event as appear like a divine judgment that caused the mind of the ancient Peruvians to make devils of the Hindu deities Deva, and which devil signified a uh, divinity or counterwise deity of the Hindu devil. It said not entirely knowing that the people they were looked upon as fabulous, while the rest of mankind were in utter ignorance on the subject. That the advocates of the theory and the quotes of the writing of the Latins of Adam of Bremen, I think that's what that said. That might be a U at the end or an, who visited the Danish kings Seven Edison, who was referring to the matters making allusions to a land discovered far away in the Atlantic called Vineland, of a great bearing vine being indigenous to its soil, admitting, however, that the voyage were made to America, they were unimportant in their influence, and that Columbus showed by the course in which he sailed on his first voyage that if he ever heard of them, he was in no way guided by them, his object being to discover a western passage to India. That's what all lying ass boss people say. Was the first Icelandic settler of Greenland, Eric the Redhead in Greenland, and it said he discovered in the year 984 from the fact that the shortest day of the sun was 8 hours above the horizon. It had been inferred by good authorities that the land referred to was about the 49th degree of the north latitude on the coast of North America near the Gulf of St. Lawrence on the island of Newfoundland, where they contended many of the Indians and the inferior show signs of the Scandinavian descent after the recent of Leif and Byron of Greenland. The relatives of Leif are said to have made several voyages to Vineland, where they traded with the natives for furs. In 1121, a bishop named Eric sailed to Greenland and Vineland to convert the Indians to Christianity. And after that, nothing is recorded of this mysterious country. So as you can see, we got the Scandinavians mixing with them for a long time. So when they ask why those Indians look so different from the Indians in the South, it's because they've been mixing for over. So you're talking about 984 that Eric the Red went there. So in 984, we talking about Christopher Columbus and them getting there in the 1400s. So we're talking about damn near, wow, damn near 600 years, 700 years, 800 years. That's crazy. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do the math on that. Y'all don't quote me on that crazy ass math I just spit out. It is what it is. Okay, and we just read that they called the chief the descendants of the sun. So it says geologists have dubbed Mississippian culture tradition that thrived from roughly AD 1000 to 1600, although the Mississippian culture was less pronounced in certain areas, including portions of what is now South Carolina. The traditions dominated much of the Southeast, changing the lifestyle of nearly all its inhabitants. Before the Mississippian area, native Southerners lived in small tribal societies in relief of a wide variety of gathered cultivated places, as well as deer, fish, and small game for their sustenance. With the dawn of the Mississippian era came a new sort of political and social organizations cheapened these religious hierarchies, hierarchically structured uh, polities emerged at the same time that the Southern Indian began to rely on a single crop corn for over 70% of their caloric needs of large scale. Clearly, the trend towards political centralization and agriculture produced were linked to the lineages likely rose to power through securing access to surplus foodstuffs. That's how Mississippian social and political orders were chiefs who reigned at virtue of their birth into the high-ranking lineage. These lineages were closely associated with the sacred, which gave their members a sort of divine right to rule. Evidence from throughout the region suggests that Mississippians believed their chiefs to have been descendants of the sun, a deity great importance to the agricultural people. A French chronicler described it as the following rituals linking the chief to celestial powers. The sun of the principal object of veneration of these people, as it cannot be conceived anything which can be above the heavenly body. Nothing else appears to them more worthy of their homage. It is the same reason that the great chief of the nation is knows nothing of the earth more dignified than himself. Okay, more on Father Crespi. It says Cortez discovered the American California. The name appears with precisely our spelling in the following passage. Known at the right hand of the Indies, there is an island called California, very near the terrestrial paradise, which was peopled by black women without any men among them, because they were accustomed to living after the fashion of the Amazons. They were of strong and hardened bodies, of ardent courage and great force. The island was the strongest in the world from the step rocks of the great cliffs. Their arms were all of gold, and so were the comparisons of the wild beasts which they rode, having tamed them. For all of the island, there is no other metal. They lived in caves very well worked out. They had many ships in which they sailed to other parts to carry on their forays. In the papers to which the paragraphs are in introduction, I translated every passage in the explanation which relates to Queen Khalifa, possibly accounted with the different ways of suggested scepter of Poseidon. Plato says that the great king Atlantis, and represented by the Greek mythologists, being the son of Kronos, the three-pronged trident being an allusion to the three great islands that formed his kingdom, North and South America, and the Atlantis that now lies buried underneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. The the embelled place of the hand of Vol, the god, the atmosphere in the Chaldean mythology also follows the Hindu god, may likewise represent the three worlds of the great region of the Egyptian Maya hieroglyph, hieroglyphic design of the characters, crown symbol, you see like a crown, like three crown, and hieroglyphs for the name of the land of the West, which the latter also figured as the sacred tree of the three branches. It says initiates in all of the other countries carved on the walls of the temples of the gods, the places of the kings, and the histories may afford to the clue to the original meaning of the said symbols, as their language has given us the true signification of the words used to celebrate priests to dismiss the initiates of Eleusinian mysteries, or by the Brahmins of the end of the religious ceremonies, and it has revealed that some long hidden mystery of the mystical Tao. The sacred mysteries were celebrated from the times immemorial to the temple of Mayak, Zabala, Nachan, Palenque, and of today, Copan, and the other places of Central America. These can be no doubt, since besides the simple sculpted on the walls of the temples of the places in two distinct instances, we have to see the rites and the tribal of the initiation described in the Popol Vuh. And as these rites and trials were identical with those of which the applicants to the initiations and the mysteries of Egypt, Greece, Chaldea, India were subjugated, and we were justified in one of the Torah burning zones, he that the part of the earth which is contained between the two tropics, they were thought to be the ancient to be uninhabited because of the effective heat. But later discoveries have found that the inhabitants by many great nations. It contains a great part of Asia, Africa, and South America. Under the two frigid or cold zones lie the part of the earth which are so cold, being a great distance from the sun, to be force or source of habit, of which the Arctic Circle near the North Pole contain New Zimbabwe, Lapland, Greenland, etc., which the Antarctic Circle near the Fourth Pole, no land has yet been discovered, though the great quantities of ice found there make it possible that there is more land near the fourth than the North Pole. Under the two temperate zones are contained those parts of the globe that lie between the tropics and polar circles. The temperate zone between the Arctic circles and the tropic Cancer contain great parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa, almost the North America. That between the Antarctic Circle and the Tropic of Capricorn contains the part of South America, or the antipode. I don't know where I read that, but shit, I wanted to fucking. Says the primitive lines of immigration are so far related to North America, where probably from the south to the north, nor the wanting the historical evidence of such a movement. The traditions, as well as the monuments of Mexico and Central America, will indicate that there was an older civilization and a higher order that attained by the than that attained by the Aztecs. The later were the Barcaphilia and subjugated the, the Dola, you see that word, probably allied to the old Carib race, without obtaining their civilization asserted their physical sway, as the origins of the Aztec The authorities are conflicting. Torquemada, Quattroni, and Calivero assigned that the northwestern or western origin, and the Prescott states that the theory derives of a stronger uh, conf- confirmation from the light of tradition. Willis Barlis says that he sees no satisfactory evidence of it true. A squire goes still further and declares that the hypothesis of a migration from Nicaragua to to Kushkalan to Anak, and although more constituents with, let's see, so when they say them two funny ass, gigantic ass words, we talking about the old brown race being invaded by this small Viking race that just kept coming back, kept invading, and eventually mixed in. The world describes the access as being reduced to slavery and almost the lowest state of degradation under the insignificant Carl Lewis, and acknowledged that the Chichimewas and the Aztecs of the Mexicans are frequently called in history Mexicans without discrimination, or distinguishing the Mexicans from those who arrived before them. It may be allowed as they spoke the same language that Montezuma's race were the Aztecs, but the following reasons are offered why they arrived by sea and not with the seven tribes. As y'all can see, we went real hard with this shit, so I'm trying to find that Black Viking post for y'all. This is always a good one. He says, describing the stone remaining of the island of Rapa, the Austral group say that his South Pacific Directory on the summit of the sixth or the highest hill or city square terrace of fortified places, some of which are very elaborate construction, but with very singular. They are most solid within. The stones are well squared and very large, and well cemented, are and evidently analogous to the terrace described in the Easter Islands. Again, describing the Easter Islands, he says this is one of the most interesting spots in the Pacific. It's remaining isolated at some of the 2,030 miles from the coast of Chile and 1,500 miles from the nearest inhabited island, except Victoria Island. So the people there in the history are ethnological problem worthy of much consideration, while their origins of one of the most important problems connected to the migration of races, how the early navigators in their canoes managed to reach the lonely spot in the teeth of the most unusual trade wind, and one of the most mysterious is one of those mysteries, and the solution of which would clear up many difficulties in history. So they say that the complexion, those are antiquated with Mr. Rawlins' scholarly work. The Phoenicians may remember his description of these people. He says that they were the complexion intermediate between the pale races of the north and the swarthy inhabitants of the south, having an abundant hair, sometimes curly but never woolly. They were above the medium height, and that their features, not unlike the Aryans or Caucasians, but somewhat less refined and regular. The noses broadish and inclined to those look the lips a little too full, their frames inclined stoutness and massiveness, while both in form and features and resembled the Jews who were their near the neighbor and infrequently intermarried with them. It was impossible for one to spend even a short time in Samoa without realizing a short time in Samoa without how suitable such a description would be applied to the Samoans, while each day the observation of them and their habits and customs would only depend, deepen the conviction that the observer was in contact with the people whose social usage must, at some possible remote period, have been in very close touch, a duplicate of found in the Bible, which the intensely spiritual form of the earthly natives worship, which an almost total abundance of idols given cause to look to the further evidence of the relation that at some date must have existed between these people. I'm aware that are many other different types found in the region, but that it is only what may be expected when recollected the influence that had been at work at the time that elapsed since the first. And you have people the latest Polynesians is one who have came into contact with the natives urged that the various stone remains of the Eastern Rapa, accession of Marshall Gilbert, Larno Swallow Strong, navigator of the Hawaiian Islands, came from a moment of doubt. Curiously enough, that the native traditions of all of the refer to the origin of some land lying in the direction of the setting sun, the relation of the strong island to the round of the harbor, which had been occupied by a powerful people called Aunt, who had Aunt or antisuyu, or the when you hear that, you see that word Aunt. If I do this one right here for doodle vision, but we'll look at her. We'll go back. The antisuyu. black devils on the coast with dancing musical instruments. And if we do let's go back there real quick. We're gonna do the history of Brazil, and then we're gonna upload this one, and then we're gonna tap back in for part two. Just a little Shango post. In the Great Atlantis, the most explicit is found in Diorigus of Siluius, as follows: the 48th event. The Phoenicians, driven by a storm while going from Gades to Africa, discovered a large island, Atlantis. Many days in the ocean west of Libya, it was very fruitful, with the mountains, large plains, navigable rivers, with many woods and fruits and valleys, plenty of wild beasts and fish. The air is mild and peaceful. It is a residence fit for gods. The inhabitants are very strong and healthful people. They have many towns with stately buildings, houses of pleasure and gardens, orchards, and etc. That's from the Doi Book 5. The translators of Dorsarius have blundered so far as to deem the island Madeira or the Canaries, which are small islands with streams and first without inhabitants. It can only apply to Haiti or even the continent of South America. The event, a black people came to Haiti from the southeast who had darts of guanine metal. It's going back to those copper mines that we talking about up there, where they was mixing gold, copper, and steel to make this special metal. It was called the Black Guanines. The tradition preserved by Herrera Garcia shell blocks indicates a colony of Negroes or a men painting black from South America. They might be black Negroes of Corqueria, mentioned by Dangelia and some other American Negro nations, of which are many. See my accounts of the ancient black nations. It says the citations from Babylon tablets referred was made to the emperor's Uriku, the bad wind. Uriku repairs as hurricane in the Popol Vuh of the ancient American Quiches, or hurricane, hurricane or hurricane, hurricane. Then the waters were agitated by the will of the hurricane, heart of the heaven, which hurricane, furricane, hurricane, and the great inundations came upon the head of these creatures. They were engulfed, and resinous thickness descend from heaven. The faces of the earth were obscure, and heavy darkening rain commenced, rain by the day and rain by the night. They were hence a great noise above their heads, as if produced by fire. Then when men seen running, pushing each other, filled with despair, they wished to climb upon their houses, and the house tumbling down fell to the ground. They wished to climb upon the trees, and the trees shook them off. They wished to enter the caves, and the caves closed themselves before them. Water and fire contributed to the universal ruin. The Pima Indians say that the son of the creator was called Suzuka, or Zeus. An eagle prophesies the deluge, but his warnings have disappeared. Then, in the twinkling of an eye, there came a peal of thunder, an awful crash, and a green mound of water reared itself over the plain and, and sewed up the land upright for the second, then cut incessantly by the lightning, goaded on the like of a great beast, and flung itself upon the prophet's hut. And when the morning broke, that there was nothing to be seen alive but one man, and if indeed he was a man, Suzuki, son of the Creator, he killed the eagle and restored his victims to life and repeopled the earth with them. So basically they're saying one man brought back all the dead and repopulated the earth after the great deluge. The Aztecs legend of the Codex of Chimalpoaled states that the fourth age, whose number is 10 times 400 plus 8, which is 4008, seen by the deluge. And then all mankind was lost and drowned and found themselves changing into fish. The sky came near the water. In a single day, all was lost. But Pygmy Negritos, although he had gone by Dr. Oli Byers, whose teeth had been filed into points from the Brotherhood Rite, Jim endued the Puberty Rite, which he was working by R.E. Brand, and had been drinking Irishmen who spent years interviewing members of the Mfugo tribe. Jim had agreed to assist Barton's research and sleeping in the village of Olag. The youth, dormantly in Fuego windows, shared the dark barn-like Olag with the adolescents and served informally as instructors. It was the rough hands of one of these that Jim had received his dance and sexual initiation into fast as their culture. Did Daisy Bates even attempt to preach or teach the Aborigines? He saw her duty only to learn from them, nurse them, and ease their lots, and pass into their foresaw them rapidly approaching extinction from approximately 300,000 when the first Persian ship brought the Wagilia, or the white fellows, from England, 1788. The numbers were dwindling, estimated 54,000 full-blood Aborigines by the time the Jim visit. Their mystical attachment to the harsh land, their mystic time of Jim's visit, their mystic attachment to the harsh land and mystic art, and their ancient rituals attached, they certain landmarks resembled those Jim knew of the connection with the Amerindian tribes of the U.S., such as the Anasazi, who had been forced to leave their home territory and had become extinct. All right, y'all, we're going to tap back in.